The 8th line says PC2's global unicast address will be derived dynamically. In a series of videos covering IPv4, it was mentioned that a computer device can get its address statically or dynamically via DHCP. That's also true with IPv6, but IPv6 also has a dynamic variation called SLAC, and in this case uses UEI64 method. The letters in SLAC stand for Stateless Address Auto-Configuration, and the letters in EUI stand for Extended Unique Identifier. The number 64 represents the 64-bit interface ID part. There's a detailed explanation pertaining to PC2 getting an IPv6 address using this method in a future video in this series, but for now, realize PC2 will get part of its interface ID from its MAC address. The interface ID can be derived from a hash value, and if that's the case, then it's considered to be privacy enhanced. In general, a hash value is generated from a string of bits to add security. For PC2 to get a global unicast address using SLAC, the router command IPv6 unicast routing is a required command that must be entered on the router. This command makes a router an IPv6 router, and also allows the router to assist other devices in its network in deriving IPv6 addressing information. When this command is entered, it causes the router to send out an all-node multicast, basically saying, does anyone need help getting an address? There are basically 3 variations. 2 variations include an IPv6 DHCP server. However, the default does not use a DHCP server. The default method is the main focus of this course, and in particular, this scenario. Once the IPv6 unicast routing command has been entered, the router sends out information every 200 seconds, basically saying, I can tell you the prefix, I can tell you the prefix length, and I can tell you your default gateway. From there, the receiving device can use this information, along with its own MAC address and 4 additional hexadecimal numerals, to configure its full IPv6 address and other associated address information. The 8th line also says, assume PC2's global unicast address is not hashed. When SLAC2 and EUI64 is used without a hash, the interface ID part and the MAC address have a direct matching, which can lead to security concerns. If the interface ID part of the address is a hash value, it adds a level of security and obscurity to the end device's IPv6 address. With some of the newer operating systems, the interface ID part of the address is hashed. But again, for this scenario, it's assumed the value is not hashed. The current version of Packet Tracer does not hash the value. However, newer Windows versions most likely will. The 9th line says, the link local address on the routers will use the hostname number for the interface ID part. Thus, R1 will use 1, and R2 will use 2.